Geek Chic, Chic, shit. That one. This is my world. Embrace it. This reminds me. I started this discussion with myself. A lot of these things start off when I'm in the truck or on the motorcycle and I'm driving along, and I have this very profound thought, and it'll go for a while in my head. And so this one in particular, I've just kind of accepted the fact that I'm a smuck. Really. Anyway, to go on the profound briefly. Don't stick me on the name if I get this wrong, but I believe it was Abraham Maslow, the guy who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychologist or psychiatrist. I always get the two confused. Very well respected in his field, I think. Or was he still in training? I don't remember now. But he was basically a psychological doctor or whatever. He goes, he ends up getting captured, World War II. He was a Jew, I believe. Puts in a concentration camp. Okay. And in the book, which I have and I read, I do read sometimes, he's captured and he's got his thesis that he's been working on. So I don't know if it was like part of his master's program or why he had this, but he had this thing. It was very important to him. And he's begging the guards at the concentration camp for them to let him keep it. And I'm like, okay, I don't think most people in concentration camps back in World War II fully appreciated their situation at the time. So, of course, the guard laughs at him. He, doesn't realize how close to certain death he was, but anyway, part of his theory on life was, this is the burden that you are given. If you shirk your responsibility and do not live up to the burden that is given to you, not only does that make you a lesser person, but that burden then is passed to somebody else, and they have to carry your burden for you. And so every time you look at a task that you know you should be doing, but you don't do it, that task is left undone until somebody else does it. And then somebody else, I saw a quote recently, similar thought, basically, just everybody is unique and nobody has the skills that you have. And so if you are given an opportunity to do something, perhaps you can do it better than anybody else who ever lived, because this is your chance. So there are days when I look around at this life that I have chosen for myself and I think, well, one, I am a complete dumbass. But then I think about Abraham Maslow. And maybe this is part of my search for meaning, which sounds really profound. And also, this hat might be just a little bit too tight on my head, but this is giving me a lot of perspective on some projects that I'm working on, just, wiring when your hands are cold, kind of a thing. The first time I experienced that, I was up in Canada, and I was running some wires for, essentially a little dog trailer that I was living in, and I was up on my mom's farm, and they had ran an extension cord out there. You really couldn't run much off of it because they were just, I think the extension cord was there to have a radio playing so the dogs had something to listen to. My mom raised dogs, so this was professionally done, right? But anyway, so I'm out there, and it's like literally, it's 20 below zero. And I'm trying to cut into a power cord that was about this big around, if I remember right. I mean, it seemed like a really, like the size of a garden hose kind of a thing. And it was wired for 220. It had 4 wires. It had, the red, the black, the white, and the ground. Okay, so 2 hots. And I got it all, cut the sheathing off, and I stripped the wire, and then I walked over and hit the power pole and shut the whole farm off for a few minutes while I made my connections, and then I hooked it back up, and I'm sitting there and I'm wearing freaking ski gloves, trying to do this delicate work that's it's probably above my abilities that day, but I got it done and I didn't die and there was no fires and everything. It actually worked. I was really happy with myself. But I remember thinking this was about the first time that I was just starting to think about the first Mars project that I was writing. So this is before the Mars project that I'm working on now. That one is loosely called Blue Moon. And so I remember thinking, okay, I'm wiring with essentially space gloves, only they weren't as rigid, but they looked kind of like what you would imagine an astronaut wearing, except these were black ski gloves, but they were that kind of padding on them. And I'm like, this is what it's going to be like, And then in the back of my mind, every task that I did that whole frickin' winter, whenever I was doing something and fighting with the gloves or just trying to get something done, I just totally embraced the fact that this is just the littlest taste of what it's going to be like doing an EVA with a spacesuit, trying to get something done. And it just made it more fun then, which was just completely retarded because I was shivering and I'm trying to do electrical work and I'm trying not to die and I'm really, a little bit scared of what I'm doing because, you're supposed to be somewhat competent when you're hooking up 220, but you do it a few times and you get a little less scared, but you still should be aware of what you're doing kind of thing. But it was just, that was kind of part of the inspiration. And so when I'm out here, and I'm like, yeah, you're wearing your freaking toque inside because you don't want to turn the heater on. It's just like, okay, if you're halfway to Mars on your little spaceship and you're looking for places to cut corners, because here's the thing. This is off-grid and going to Mars have enormous crossover. That's why I keep looking at it. Is when you're off-grid, you've got a limited amount of power, and you can cheat a little bit, or on Star Trek, they're always shutting down life support so they can get the weapons to work, because if you don't get the weapons to work, you don't care about life support because the Romulans just vaporize your dumb butt. So if you survive the battle, then you can turn life support back on if there's anything left of it. That's the thinking, And having spent time in the Navy, I could totally understand that. If you don't stop the leak in the ship, nothing else matters. Because if the ship sinks, okay, none of the rest of that stuff matters at all. You lost the ship, you lost the fight, you're dead. Chris Hadfield, Canadian astronaut who spent time on the International Space Station. This was kind of fun. Adam Savage for Mythbusters, Andy Weir, the guy who wrote the book The Martian, and Chris Hadfield were on stage together after watching a screening of The Martian, and they took questions from the audience, but they also asked each other questions and had a pretty good discussion up there. And Chris Hadfield, the astronaut, complimented Andy Weir on the fact that he did get the astronaut mentality down pretty good. And there was a line where basically, if you solve all of these problems, you get to go home. But if you don't solve the very first problem, you're dead before the second problem becomes a problem, right? Because it's kind of a harsh life out there. I mean, you literally, if your car breaks down, you coast to a stop and then you pull out your cell phone and you call for a ride. But you're not going to die instantly from lack of oxygen, because you can roll the windows down and you're surrounded by oxygen. Even if you're on an airplane and you crash into a desert island, you at least have oxygen. If your spaceship springs a leak and you can't find it, yeah, you've got problems that are going to kill you very, very quickly. So it's just kind of an interesting lifestyle to look at, you know. But they look at these problems as these are parts of the puzzle, and if you solve the puzzle, you get to go home again. And I'm like, I just love that mentality, you know. Me, you know, if I get a hard day, you know, it's, you know, I'm ready to throw in the towel. But, you know, if you're stuck on Mars, I mean, if you ever get a chance, watch the movie, but definitely read the book, The Martian. Because Andy Weir in the book, he actually said this in one of the interviews I saw of him. He said that there were a few things that, because he just kept giving him problem after problem after problem. So the whole book is just like that, where you're like, man, is this guy ever going to get a break? You know, and a couple times he just gives up, and then a couple minutes later, okay, I'm back. You know, because what are your options? You know, it's like if you're going to walk home and you're halfway home, well, you can't stop. You're only halfway home. You don't. There's no. You're not home. You keep walking until you get home. There's no other way about it. So he did say in the interview that I saw that there were a few problems that he dreamed up that he couldn't figure out a solution. So he just took those back out of the book. I'm like, okay, that's convenient. He was like, yeah, we didn't really want to kill him. We just wanted it to be really, really close. You know, like, yeah, perfect. Anyway, I'm gonna go plug my heater in and get some stuff going. And for anybody wondering, yeah, the speaker wire, it's not running the heater, it's just running a little fan, which is basically, it is actually a computer case fan, so that doesn't need very much. In fact, this is probably more a bigger wire gauge than the wire that's on the fan anyway, so it'll be okay. I checked.